class was really powerful and good for you, but this is the basics. The definitions are the basics, and that's the bare minimum if you want to make sure that you have your own notes. So I'm going to be bouncing around from this website to a slideshow that I had made, along with some other web pages and things like that. So let's just jump into this web slideshow. So our thing is self, and understanding what this really means to you. And a lot of what I'm going to be saying on this video is pretty much going to be read off of this, but these are there just so that you can see and hear it at the same time. So the big question in class that I put up on the board was, who am I? And I had that in bubble letters, and I was saying it was circa 1993. It was a style of writing that was popular when I was younger. So anyway, the who am I question, it's a huge ongoing question. It's just way more complex than it sounds like. And the answer needs to change over time. So who you are now better be different than who you were 5 years ago, and it should be different than who you're going to be 5 years from now. At the time that I'm recording this, I'm 44 years old, and for me even, 5 years ago, I was a different person than I am now, and I'm sure 5 years from now, I'm going to be even more different. 10 years from now, I'm going to be really different with who I am as a person. And everybody changes over time, and this is not a question that's an elementary school question. It's a question that everyone should be asking themselves. And when you're first asked, who am I, a lot of people, generally speaking, have no idea how to answer this really question. Most people, they answer it with labels. Like, for instance, if I was asked this question, I would immediately say that I was a father, husband, teacher, coach. I might identify myself based on characteristics or demographic information. So I might say something like, I'm white, I'm male, I'm American. I might say a reference to my religious beliefs. I might say a reference to my sexual orientation or gender identity, like my political affiliation, something like that. So a lot of people, they immediately look at labels and demographic information, and some people look at character traits, and the character traits would be things for me like I'm organized, or some people might say that they're intelligent, some people might say that they're good looking, some people might say that they're not good looking, some people might say that they're skinny, or that they're fat, or that they're athletic, or that they're a nerd, or whatever. They use these labels, character traits, and demographic information to describe themselves and who they are. Realistically, the answer to the question, who am I, is going to have many, many parts to it, and it should progress and evolve as you learn new things and get older and more experienced in life. And any discussion on this question of who am I really needs to start with a definition of self. So what is self? Self is simply who you are. And that's just a really simplistic definition. And everybody's like, duh, no kidding, Captain Obvious. But we got to break that down into some other things. Like, throughout this unit, when I refer to self, this is what I'm really saying, is who you are. But more specifically, we have to look at 3 words. Self-esteem, which is how high or low you think about yourself. Self-concept, which is how you think about yourself compared to how others see you. And self-image, which is what you think others think about you. So breaking these down more individually, self-esteem, how high or low you think about yourself. A dictionary defines it as, well, this is a quote from a woman named Tracy Kennedy. We're going to look at her stuff in a little bit from that specific article posted on Lifehack, but she quotes in the article, Tracy Kennedy that it is, quotes in the article, while the dictionary defines it as confidence in one's own worth or abilities, self-respect. Put simply, self-esteem is the overall sense or feeling you have about your own self-worth or self-value. So I look at it this way. Low self-esteem is negative, has negative effects on your personal health. Some people try to fix it by putting themselves on a pedestal. And in class, this is when I stood up on the chair and made myself taller than the person that was standing next to me. I picked a student that was relatively about the same height as me, and I stood up on a chair. I put myself on a pedestal, and I was saying that I pretend or I act like I'm better than they are. And a little spelling mistake Little spelling mistake right here. Sorry about that. But I stand on this chair and I put myself on this pedestal acting like I am better than the people. I look down on people. And I do this, and it's this false, fake facade of make-believe. And sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes you can go and say that you're better at people in certain things or more intelligent than people in certain things. But putting yourself up on a pedestal and making yourself more important than you actually are, that may be a sign of a low self-esteem, because you might be faking it. If you're not faking it and you're doing it, then you're just not a humble person and you're bragging all the time. And that's a different conversation for a different day. And we can discuss at a different class whether it's acceptable to be able to brag when you're really good at something, or whether you should be more humble and accepting. But sometimes a person with low self-esteem, they do that to be able to compensate for their low self-esteem. And it's fake. It's like wearing a mask. And we watched that one video for homework talking about people wearing masks all the time. Just masks, this fake facade in front of you that's not really who you are. Some people try to fix low self-esteem by putting other people down. And we talked a lot about bullying and violence when we were talking about that section of the unit. But we could also talk about judging others, just putting other people down in general. Like a lot of times if we're bullying people, not bullying people, but a lot of times if we're judging others, really we're judging others because we're not happy with who we are. And we have a low sense of self and low sense of self-esteem. And some people don't really realize that it needs to be fixed. They have low self-esteem and they think that everything's fine. They don't do anything to fix it, or they don't know how to fix it. And then they allow it to eat away at them. They dwell on the negative, and others often cannot see the positive, and it causes multiple mental and physical problems, including an outlook on life that essentially does not allow them to see the bright side of things. And it's really terrible the way that happens. We're going to look at self-esteem again in a few moments, but before we do that, self-concept, remember we defined it as how you think about yourself compared to what others think. How you think compared to how others see you. So some people dwell on the positive and ignore the negative. Others do the opposite. They dwell on the negative and ignore the positive. And it really comes down to, what do you think about yourself compared to what others think about you? So some common examples were somebody who really thinks that they're not good at anything, and somebody else goes and ends up admiring you for doing something. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you think that you're really great at something, and others think that you're really just not that good. And I don't mean that they tear you down and make you feel bad so that you don't ever try it again, because that's just them being mean, and they don't need to be aggressors like that. But sometimes it's okay to give somebody a reality check. If you have for example, when I taught in middle school, I had this 8th grade boy who swore he was going to be a basketball player, but he was not tall enough. He couldn't dribble enough. He wasn't fast enough. He didn't have any defensive skills. His grades were terrible, so he wasn't getting the opportunity to play. And when he was going to play with his friends, he was one of the worst ones there. That's an unrealistic expectation. It's an unrealistic self-concept. So the people around him, they were saying that he wasn't good enough, and he was saying that he was. But on the other hand, you have people doing the exact opposite. You have somebody that says they're never good enough. They'll say, I'm stupid, I can't read, I can't do this, I can't do that. And other people are like, no, I really think that you're an intelligent person. So, I don't know. Just something to thought. Do you think you're great and others think that you're not? So the question is, do you have facts to back up your thoughts? Because the facts can't lie. What about, do you think you're poor at something and others think you're good at that? Do they have facts to back you up? So what do the facts say? Not just what your assumptions say, not just what your perceptions say, but what do the facts say? And we're going to be doing an activity very shortly that you're going to see what other people think about you and compare it to what you think they would say. And see if anybody says anything that's surprising. So we'll have to see about that. Let me go on to the next one, Oh, sorry. It's the same thing. Self-concept, how you think about yourself compared to how others see you. When is it a problem? Um, it's a problem when you have trouble accepting a compliment or accepting a criticism. And a lot of the times it's due to you just not believing what they're saying. Otherwise, yeah, it's true. You shouldn't really care about what other people think about you so much, but sometimes you need to. Because if what other people are saying is, if your character is in question, if what you're doing or the kind of person that you are is somebody who's mean, somebody that's detrimental, somebody that's causing problems in society, then maybe you do want to care what other people think. But on the other hand, if other people are just trying to put you down and you're happy with who you are, then you don't want to listen to them. So they could be wrong, but what if they're right? All right, self-image is what you think others think about you. There's not really a big explanation about this. This is just your perception only. There's no comparison, no reality. It's just a total assumption. So if we can get away from this for a second and we can look at this article again from Tracy Kennedy. It's posted on Lifehack, and there's the link again. It's posted on Lifehack. It's called How to Build Self-Esteem, a Guide to Realize Your Hidden Power. It seems that it was posted in 2018 because that's when the comments were, even though the date's not on here at the top. And it's a really long article, but it's really, really good. There's a lot of articles out there, and a lot of them are professional psychiatrists or psychologists or counselors that are doing some fantastic work. And this is just one I happened to stumble upon while I was looking for images to share with my class in class. And Miss Kennedy, here we go, Tracy Kennedy goes and has this article, What is Self-Esteem? Where does low self-esteem come from? And she has some examples there of where it comes from. What happens when you lack self-esteem? Assess your own self-esteem. And then she has this infographic comparing high self-esteem with low self-esteem. I'm not really going to go through it because you can find the article yourself if you want to. But what I want to show you is this graphic that she has down here. And it's just a really good graphic. I don't know if she came up with it or if somebody else came up with it and she used it in her article, or whether this is a concept that's a concept in psychology that I just don't know about because I'm just a teacher. But you have low self-esteem, and that goes and translates into negative thoughts. And the negative thoughts go and cause you high levels of anxiety, which we said in class before was another word for stress, and poor performance. So your grades start to stumble. You're not able to do as well in athletics or in performances or your art or things like that. And then that causes failure. And then that failure causes you to blame yourself, like it's your fault that this happens. And maybe sometimes it's your fault because you weren't dealing with your anxiety and stress and things like that, and you weren't positively self-talking, and you were dwelling on the negative thoughts. So yeah, you could be accurate and blaming yourself about that, but then what do you do about it? The problem is with this vicious cycle, you don't do anything about it. You go back to having more low self-esteem, and you drag yourself down, and your sense of self-worth, your sense of self continues to decrease, and then you go back to these negative thoughts, high anxiety, poor performance again. So in reality, when this failure happens, you need to take a detour, and that's when you need to start doing something to solve the problem. Along with this, in the article, she lists several things that people can do, 12 different things that you can do to be able to improve your sense of self and self-esteem. And I'm not going to get into too many of them because it's her work, but there's a lot of things that we can do to be able to build upon that. So, along with this, we have this thing about personality. And personality is basically how you act. There's a ton of different personality tests and evaluations out there. And for class, I like to focus on a couple different things. The first thing I like to focus on is the True Colors methodology. This is from TrueColorsInternational.com. The first time that I used this was in a graduate school class on personality. And it takes 4 colors, gold, orange, green, and blue, and it identifies them into primary personalities, and they have different traits to them. So this graphic shows that orange people are energetic, spontaneous, and charming. Gold people are punctual, organized, and precise. Green people are analytical, intuitive, and visionary. And blue people are empathetic, compassionate, and cooperative. And then there's some self-image stuff about the 4 colors, and it explains people how you are. So your personality defined, and I like this one because it talks about self-image. So it goes and it helps you being able to understand who you are as a person based on what your personality is. Along with that is Howard Gardner's, sorry for the pronunciation, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which has been worked on by some other experts throughout the years. This is not that great of a graphic. We'll use this one instead. And for this particular graphic, we'll just save this here. And with this particular graphic, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different intelligences. So I like to tell the classes everybody is good at something, but you might not be good at everything. So I am not musically talented. I can't sing well. I sing out of tune most of the time. I can't play an instrument. I can't read music. I can't even begin to understand how to read music because it's just a complete foreign language to me, and I'm bad at learning language, which comes back to linguistic. I'm not really good at learning languages. Never have been. Not my strong suit. But along with that, when it comes back to musical, there are some things that I can do musically, like I can get 2 songs and be able to blend them together on a computer software program. I can create playlists that are acceptable and pleasing to most people that are listening to them. At least, maybe not for young people now that I'm older, but growing up I was always able to do that for different things. Excuse me, sorry. Thank you. So there's different things. And then intrapersonal versus interpersonal intelligence, communicating and reading people. Like, I can read people pretty well, and I can communicate when I need to, but I don't really like doing it that much. Intrapersonal is understanding yourself, what you feel, and what you want. And I'm really, really good at that. I do really understand myself much better. Other people are the opposite. Other people don't understand themselves that well, and they do understand others much better. And then there's all different types of intelligences, and who you are and how you got to be, it developed some of these. Well, they all get developed, but some of them got developed more than others. And that's important in the long run for who you are as a person. So it comes back down to this: what made me, me? There are some things about yourself you had little to do with, and in fact, who you are is really just a complex combination of internal factors and external factors. Some of them were influences you learned from, while others are things you choose to do. There's about 7 or so slides that explain this more, and this complex combination of both internal and external factors. So first up, genetics. Now, you had nothing to do with this. Your mother and your father, your 2 parents, and if you were adopted or if you are in foster care or something like that, then you might call different people your parents. But the people that made you when you were born, okay, they caused you to have all of your DNA. We know that half your chromosomes came from your mother and half your chromosomes came from your father. And they determine a lot about your physical self. Your physical self includes your body height and your size, your metabolism, your hair, eyes, skin color, and tone, and physical defects or trends. So a lot of these can determine on who you are and how you are as a person. So shorter people tend to be looked down upon, and I don't mean literally by taller people, but taller people tend to have more opportunities when it comes to different things. People that are overweight tend to be frowned upon in society. People with slower metabolisms can't digest food and use food as well. Or hair different styles of hair are found more aesthetically pleasing in our country and give people more opportunities. Skin color and skin tone. There's a whole big section of African American history that talks about white privilege and the privileges that came to white people from European descents and things like that. And I often say that I don't fully understand what that means because I grew up in a low-income family in a blue-collar, hardworking neighborhood, that I don't understand what the privileges were that were afforded, because most of my friends did not go to college. They went to working class, blue-collar, trade-like jobs right away, and things like that. And I have a hard time understanding that myself. But I definitely know that watching articles and watching unfortunate incidences that happen, that some people are afforded just more liberties and more freedoms basically because of the color of their skin. We had nothing to do with that. No one except for your parents had anything to do with what color your skin is, and how people look at you is often determined by that. Physical defects. There are all kinds of things that happen just because you're born. One of the most popular things that think about is Down syndrome. If you have an extra chromosome and you have Down syndrome, that helps define your life and how you look and how you act and how you talk. A lot of it has to be determined by that. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not talking bad about Down syndrome people at all. Like, a lot of times they're wonderful and can do many, if not all, the things that everybody that doesn't have Down syndrome can do. But there's definitely something that makes them stand out, and that is something that never happened. What about other defects that you can't see, though? Like, what about a person that has like a hole in their heart and they need continual surgeries to be able to fix that? Like, that's part of who you are. Or what about the 3-year-old that goes and has cancer, like my little cousin who has cancer, and he's fighting this tooth and nail at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia? Like, there was some sort of defect when he was born that caused this to happen. Along with DNA, it also affects mental and emotional things, such as how someone learns or how someone retains information. Sometimes you can be prone to addiction because of genetics, although it's arguable whether that's always a thing or not. Anxiety and depression are sometimes tied to genetics. And oftentimes, mental illness are tied to chemical imbalances in the brain. Well, the chemical imbalances weren't something that just happened overnight. They're something that happened due to DNA and genetics, more than likely. Sex and puberty and what role they tie. Again, you had nothing to do with this. When you were being developed inside of your mother's womb, some things happened, and along with your chromosomes, most of people were either XX or XY. There are some other variations, which we talked about when we were differentiating sex and gender, but for the most part, most people have XX or XY chromosomes, and sex dictates what changes happen during puberty. And those hormone levels, aside from the physical changes, also cause a variety of personality changes. They cause mood swings, they cause aggression, they cause a lot of different things to happen, and that's important to understand. But then, away from genetics, what about your influences? Specifically, what about your family influences? What kind of traditions did they teach you? What kind of behaviors did you learn from them were right and were wrong? What were the norms? What do you think is quote-unquote normal? What do you think is the way things should be? Your family is the number one influence up until approximately 2nd grade, and my wife's family, of mostly Italian, they are loud and in your face and in everybody's business and obnoxious. And every year down the shore, we have tons of opportunities where everybody's just in everybody's business and everything is so loud. And my wife just thinks that's just normal. That's just how all families should be. And she doesn't understand when they're not. She doesn't understand if you sit around the dinner table and you don't really talk. Like, you have to be talking, you have to be moving, you have to be loud, you have to, so what are the norms in your family? What you think is normal may be something that really is specific to just your family. Cultural and racial ancestry and understanding also help contribute to who you are. And I don't just mean your own cultural or racial ancestry. I mean the cultural and racial ancestry of all people and individuals. The more you know, the more you try, the more you're able to understand others. But you also are able to understand yourself. So what kind of foods do you like and prefer based on others? A lot of that has to do with your culture. What kind of language can you speak, or how many different languages can you speak? Some of that has to do with your ancestry and your culture. Customs, such as what dances you are, what kinds of clothes you like to wear. And what about stereotypes? What happens when stereotypes come out to be true? What happens when stereotypes are just assumed? So stereotypes are stereotypes because for sometimes they are true. So what about you? Are you living a life that's full of stereotypes that when people look at you, they would be like, oh yeah, they're that because... but that could sometimes help contribute to who you are. And I was sort of rambling, and at this limited video, it was already a little bit too long. It's kind of hard to explain. But the point is that, are you living a stereotype? Are you doing what people assume you should do? Are you doing something because that particular stereotype is true for you? Or do people just assume that it's true? I don't know. Of course, we have other external influences. What's popular, what's cool, what's acceptable. And in pop culture, the most popular things are social media, music, streaming, movies, and television that go and influence people for what's popular at the given time and moment. And people start acting that way or doing those things. In the video individuality that we looked at in class or for homework, depending on what class you were in and whether I showed it to you or not, everybody was wearing masks. And if you listened to the PA speaker, even though the main actress didn't say any words, when you were looking at when you were listening to the PA system, they were saying things like, okay, everybody wear your red masks today. And somebody else was like changing their masks from going from one group to another. So what was popular, what was cool. And one of the posters said, this is what beautiful looks like. And she was wearing a yellow mask. So all the people around the poster went and got themselves yellow masks. So what's popular, what's cool, what's trending? That also influences who you are and how you act. And then comes down to the meat and potatoes, like the big thing that happens. And these are major life events. And there's quotes because some of these are actually major life events and some of them aren't. So real life major life events are the school of your choice. Like if Rush was your first choice and you applied to there and you got in, how exciting was that for you? How monumental? How much of it changed? Now, what happens if you had to go somewhere else and you didn't get into your first choice? Then what? What happens? So that's a big thing that happens in your life. What about moving from one house to another? What about divorce? What about a death? I talked about all of those things in class. When I moved when I was in 6th grade, it was a traumatic event. When my mother and father got divorced when I was in 2nd grade, it was a traumatic event. When my mom died when I was 19, it was a traumatic event. And all three of these things, they shaped me and they changed me. And I did complete changes on each of those times in my life, both all traumatic events. What about a loss in your life? Maybe it's a loss of a best friend, or maybe it's something silly like a loss of your favorite pillow or your favorite blanket from when you were a baby. But it really changed how you acted or what you did or how you coped with things. I don't know. What about a breakup? Whether it's a boyfriend-girlfriend or a best friend breakup, what about a breakup? Were you ever bullied? Maybe that's something that changed you. Maybe it made you fearful. Maybe it made you tougher. I don't know, but that could have changed you. Being born is a pretty major life event. How about little things that seem little at the time, but learning to ride a bike for the first time, or your first pair of cleats if you're an athlete, or your first ball, or your first pair of ballet shoes? Or what about a special surprise or event that just shaped your life forever? I always tell the story about how my mother and my godmother picked me up from school and took me to a matinee movie of Return of the Jedi back in 1985, and it completely changed my life to make Star Wars one of my all-time favorite movie franchises. And I'm this big sci-fi Star Wars nerd, and it's not just because I like the movies, it's because that event was memorable in my life to help shape me and my love for that particular event. So my parents influenced me to doing that. About going someplace special. 2 years ago, we went to Italy, and my wife was able to meet all of her ancestors on the father side of the family for the very first time. And now she's like changing her name to the Italian pronunciation of it. So going someplace really special. And then there's some question marks, because there could be other major events in your life that obviously are not here, and some of them could be really, really great, and some of them could be really, really bad. And so a lot of people go through some bad things in their past, and they can't move on from it. They have to deal with it, they have to cope with it, and they have to live life. But some people have trouble doing that. So these can be major things that happen sometimes when you're a small child, sometimes when you're not. But these are major things that happen to you and shape you. And what else? There could be so many different things that cause a person to determine who they are and what kind of person they're going to be on the inside. But before we end, I wanted to speak about a minute about body image. And we're not going to spend hardly any time on body image in class, just one class or two talking about it, and then a homework assignment. But body image obviously is your view and feeling on your personal appearance. So when you look in the mirror, what do you look like? What do you see? It's usually associated with weight, but not always. Stereotypically, girls want to lose weight and guys want to bulk up. They want to gain muscle weight. Now, that's not always the case. There's obviously exceptions to the rule, but that's basically what it is. And if you go online, whether it's Google or YouTube, there's all kinds of talk about positive body image, and almost always associated with women. There's oftentimes pictures of like a girl who's at a healthy body weight and a healthy shape, looking into a mirror, and what she sees is this overweight person. Sometimes they go to extreme, and there's this unhealthy, skinny, almost skeleton-like figure looking into a mirror, and then they see like this really fat, overweight person on the other side in the mirror. So what a person sees in their body image isn't always what other people see. And the question comes out to what is beauty. And people like to say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But who determines what is beautiful? So, we have this American ideal of what is beautiful. And then there's other cultures that have a different ideal. And it is different in all different countries and what they consider beautiful. But what we really need to worry about is this question. Can you have a healthy sense of self-image without having a healthy body image? And if you want to rephrase that, can you be happy with who you see if you're not happy with what you see? And what about vice versa? Can you be happy with what you see if you're not happy with who you see? So, and this is not to talk about obesity and healthy body image, because they're different. Healthy body mass index, because from a physical and health standpoint, there is obesity. That is a cause of disease. There is unhealthiness that goes along with that, and we do want to be at a healthy body weight and without a lot of body fat. But we're not talking about physical health right now. We're totally talking about psychological health. And if you are not happy with your body, then you should do something about it. But the problem with people that have a unhealthy body image is that they don't see what they really look like. They go back to this negative self-esteem, negative self-image.